Minimalism is the next movement that's covered in this chapter. And minimalism is related to abstract expressionism in a way, because if you remember, abstract expressionism thought about, what if you just think about what the medium of painting allows? Well, this really thinks about what does the medium of sculpture allow, or what does 3D art, right, allow. So here, is what we think of as a traditional role of sculpture. We traditionally think of it as being about representation, usually commemorative in some kind of way. It's usually people, right? And so this is usually what we think about when we think of sculpture. And so basically, what minimalists do is they say, what if you take these theories about medium and expand it to sculpture and think about what sculpture truly is? And I'd say that truly all it is 3D form. It doesn't mean it has to represent anything. So they consider, how can you rethink sculpture? When you're looking at the movement, you'll notice it really thinks about shape and form. So it stresses sort of serialization or repeating a theme. So you see a lot of repeated themes or repeated forms. It's often noted for the use of very strange materials or industrial materials. The piece on the left is made out of iron and steel. So it's materials that typically weren't considered very sculptural, like let's say marble in the previous examples I showed you for the traditional works. And when you think about using like steel and iron, you have to either be comfortable with those materials, or you have to hire people that know how to use them. So just like with Warhol using assistants, minimalists often used assistants as well. And again, this changes the whole idea of like, what does it mean to make art? On the right, you have a Hesse piece using fiberglass, which is, again, a strange material to use. Unfortunately, at the time, they didn't know it was toxic, and she actually died from developing a brain tumor, a cancerous tumor, from using the fiberglass in her work. So it's sort of an unfortunate story about how art materials can often be dangerous. Looking at some pieces, Donald Judd is considered probably the primary minimalist that you run into. And Judd wanted to think about, again, how do you strictly think about form? Notice that, again, most of these works are untitled. They're not representing something. They're often repeating shapes. They use very strange and different materials. If you want to see some Judd works installed, you can travel to Marfa, Texas, and go to the Chinati Foundation. It's a fabulous foundation where Donald Judd's work is stored. It's actually on a decommissioned army base. And so it's this big old army base with a lot of the original buildings there reconverted into art spaces. You're looking here at some of the concrete pieces of Judd's out on the terrain. And there's other works by other artists that are curated by the Chinati as well. It's such a fabulous place because it's out in the middle of nowhere, and you just, you're kind of looking at art in the American landscape in a way that's really not the traditional viewing experience. So I definitely recommend going there. Minimalism, people question it. It raises certain problems. One of them I'd say is, the idea of aesthetics or enjoying a piece, right? Probably the most well-known piece is, again, Richard Serra's Tilted Arc. You may remember running into this piece previously in the sculpture chapter. And one of the things discussed there was the fact that this piece, a lot of people thought was ugly. It got in their way. They actually had a lawsuit, revolving around this piece. And you can go back and look at the different questions that are raised there. Is art about beauty, or is it about function, or is it about the artist's vision? Minimalism, to me, as a contemporary movement, it raises all these questions and problems. Aside kind of a brother-sister movement to minimalism is earthworks. Earthworks use a lot of the same philosophy, but it's outside. And so we often see it referred to as environmental or site-specific art. It's thinking about, like, what if you're not using a gallery or a museum? And then how do you own this stuff, And probably the most well-known earthwork curator is the Dia Foundation. They're very famous for taking a lot of these earthworks and curating them. And you've already seen the Robert Smithson piece, Spiral Jetty. Here it is again. And so this is a piece in the Great Salt Lake in Utah. And we discussed how this is taking sculpture outside into the environment. The DIA actually maintains this site, which is intriguing because Smithson actually wanted this piece to break down originally. He wanted it to experience entropy or breakdown. So, us wanting to look at it is kind of at odds with the artist's will. So there's that problem, right? And so you've already seen a little bit of that one. This is Walter DeMaria. And he just does works that are really interesting. We're kind of waiting on the environment to create the piece, such as Lightning Field. This piece is located in southwestern New Mexico. You actually have to make an appointment to stay in a little cabin out there and hope that, when you're there, you're going to have a lightning storm. I actually used to live in New Mexico and Arizona. And those areas are known for what we call monsoon. It's similar to what you have in Florida with like the daily rains, but a little different. You can kind of time your watch to it. And so DeMaria tried to pick an area that was very known for monsoon activity, especially in the summer, so that you could have this type of lightning effect. He's also famous for the New York Earth Room. If you're ever in New York, in the Soho region of New York City, you can go and find the New York Earth Room. You have to find it, though. It's very well hidden unless you know where it is. You have to be rung up. It's in like a traditional townhouse. You wouldn't even know it was there if you didn't know it was there. And it's just what it sounds like. It's an earth room. So you'll notice that these things are kind of unexpected, either taking the artwork, out of the gallery or bringing the earth into the gallery, right? This is Ólafur Eliasson, who's an Icelandic artist. He often talks about how Iceland affects the kind of works he makes. He did a recent riff off DeMaria by doing a lava room. That's kind of fun. This was a piece I actually got to help install and write about when I was an intern at the Carnegie during my master's degree. I'd gone to work the summer of 1999. I went to work as an intern at the Carnegie Museum of Art in Pittsburgh. And as part of their Carnegie International, I got to see the installation of this piece, got to help out with some of the educational materials around it. So this is a piece that's very special to me personally, and I love talking about it for that reason. But as the environment changes, the piece changes. So, in the winter, the little like constructed lake would freeze. It would change based on the environment, which I thought was really neat. This is another piece he did a couple years ago, the New York waterfalls. On the right, by the way, you can see the sketches, his sort of computer visualization of how he wanted the pieces to look, and then on the left, how it actually came to be. I love this idea of creating these waterfalls in the middle of a city. Christo and Jean-Claude, very famous earthworks artists as well. They're often known for wrapping things. And they create these pieces that you'll notice with the dating, we actually date them from the first time the piece is considered as an idea, and then when it actually gets executed. So often the dates on these are long running dates. And I think they're kind of interesting because they have to work with people, a very different kind of people to make sure these things come off. Like in the case of Running Fence, it went through numerous different patches of real estate where they'd have to talk to like a cattle farmer or a vineyard and say, hey, can we have permission to come do this, running fence on your property? It's a very collaborative type of art making. And they actually sell the project drawings to raise the money for the pieces. So that's how they get the funds to make the finished products. So here are just some of their pieces. The Valley Curtain in Rifle Gap, Colorado. The Surrounded Islands in the Biscayne Bay in Miami. The famous Umbrellas project that was both done it was co-done, right, in USA and Japan. So you can just see some of the ways they've tried to approach this idea of earthworks. The most famous one recently was the Gates, which was done in Central Park. Very cool piece.